My name is Silverlock, and today I'll be attempting a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Violet using only genderless Pokémon. As I'm sure you all know, some Pokémon are born male, some are born female, and some are born neither, both, or all. Officially designated as Gender Unknown, these Pokémon make up a group that don't really fit the normal gender binary in the series. A large majority of them are legendary or mythical, but that still leaves a good amount of regular Pokémon that don't fit either gender for various reasons. And with that in mind, I was interested to see if I can beat Pokémon Violet with that select group of Pokémon. So in addition to the typical Nuzlocke rules, I can only catch one Pokémon of unknown gender per area of the game, I have to play as if the game was on set mode, I won't be allowed to use healing items in battle, and there will be level caps in place based on the level of a boss trainer's ace. So with that out of the way, let's start the run. We start things off as we always do, by first picking our starter. I go ahead and pick Quaxly, but this little guy is a guy. So the boy's only use will be to get through the beginning areas of the game, since there will be no genderless Pokemon available to us right away. So after taking a full 2 hours to get to school, I can finally make a quick trip to the road leading to the Pokemon League, where I immediately locate our first eligible encounter, a Tandemaus who I name Ratatosk. Next I head over to the ruins of South Province 2, where we find our second encounter, a Bronzor who I name Heimdall. Then I make a quick trip over to Kitakami, where on the Reveler's Road we can find a Poltergeist who I name Freya. And after a little exploring on the west side of Oni Mountain, we can find an unremarkable teacup in the little cave north of this lake. With that, Freya can immediately evolve into Sinistcha, giving us a strong, fully evolved Pokemon before our very first major battle. Of course, since Freya is a grass type, it wouldn't be wise to start with them against Katie and her bug types. Instead, I start with Ratatosk, who takes out her Nimble with a couple aerial aces, but not after a super effective double kick brings them down to about half. Another 2 aerial aces takes out Tarantula as well, but thanks to a bug bite bringing them down to a fourth, we're forced to switch over to Heimdall as Katie's Teddiursa terastallizes and starts a Fury Cutter combo. And the first hit ends up doing way more than I was expecting. I'm already panicking at this point since the second hit is going to hurt no matter who is on the receiving end. So I decide to keep Heimdall in, and Teddiursa misses. Thanks to that lucky break, Heimdall can use Confuse Ray, and after Teddiursa hurts herself on the next turn, a Rock Blast ends up hitting 3 times to bring her down to about half. But then Teddiursa quickly breaks out of confusion on the next turn and connects with another Fury Cutter. So in order to win, Heimdall has to connect at least 4 times with her next Rock Blast. And somehow, Heimdall gets all the hits we need, helping us get away with what could have been a potential early defeat. With our first win under our belt, we're off to a shaky and lucky start. The fight against the Titan Cloth, by comparison, goes off without a hitch thanks to Freya. A Machagotcha could take it down in a single hit in its first phase, and it gets immediately burned by another one in its second phase, which ends up helping us take it down easily. And before taking on the next gym, I return to the other side of the region to West Province 1, where we can delve into more ruins to find a Phalanx, who I name Valkyrie. Our second collective also happens to come with an awesome adamant nature, which is pretty fitting for their namesake. We then make our return to the east side of Paldea, and after taking some time to wrangle up some choppy-looking Sunflora, one of my favorite pastimes, we get to take on Brassius and his grass types. Valkyrie leads the charge, and thanks to the lunch TM I happen to come across, they have no issue taking down Petalil and Smoliv with a single super effective hit each. And while his Terastallized Sudowoodo is sturdy enough to take a few hits, the attack drops from lunge means it can't do any effective amount of damage. All it can do is Trailblaze until it actually starts to outspeed, before a third lunge eventually takes it down, giving us another effortless gym victory. But the next fight against the Titan Bombardier won't be as effortless. I start with Ratatosk lowering its attack with Baby Doll Eyes, but a Rock Throw and a Wing Attack manage to bring them down to just 3 HP as they end up missing a Thunder Wave that would have been crucial. So I switch to Valkyrie on a resisted Rock Throw, and lucky for us, it decides not to switch to using Wing Attack right away, meaning we can lower its attack further with a lunge, while healing a bit with a held Shell Bell. A Pluck brings them down to half, but as we keep using lunge, the super effective damage ends up getting mitigated enough to give us a hard but well-earned victory. Oh yeah, that was just the first phase. Crap. At least for the second round, we have Arven and his Knackley dividing its attention. I have to start off by switching Ratatosk out for Heimdall, as Knackley just boosts their speed with a Rock Polish. Their Smackdown does some decent damage, while I have Heimdall go for Confuse Ray, which gives us some breathing room as Bombardier immediately hits itself on the next turn. With a couple more Smackdowns from Knackley and a Power Gem from Heimdall, Titan Bombardier finally falls. It's actually kind of rare when Arven ends up carrying the fight for me. Not sure how I feel about that. Now we flip back over to the east side of Paldea, and after getting accosted by a gang of Tauros, I find a Magnemite in East Province 2, who I name Thor. Their magnet pull ability isn't really useful compared to what it could have had, but a calm nature boosting its special defense is an acceptable trade-off. Then back over to the west we go, where we can take on our first Team Star fight against Giacomo. We start by first boosting Valkyrie's attack and defense with a bulk up, which helps his Poniard go down easy to a single, quad-effective Rock Smash on the following turn. His Starmobile comes in next, and thanks to a Held Clear amulet, its Intimidate fails to lower their attack. This allows Valkyrie to hit hard with a couple lunges while lowering the Starmobile's attack. A couple Swifts does bring Valkyrie down below half, but after terastallizing, the extra boost to the damage of Rock Smash ends up being just enough to take it down, giving us a quick and decisive win. We return to the other side of the map to Levincia City, and after Freya single-handedly takes care of Nemona, thanks to some nasty plot setup, we can immediately take on the next gym battle against Iono. Her fight is often considered the first major skill check of the game for a few good reasons, so we need to be careful. Thor starts us off by easily taking out her Wattrel with a strong neutral hitting Thunderbolt, then confusing Luxio with a Confuse Ray. I then switch over to Freya, but Luxio fights through confusion to land a super effective critical hit bite. But despite that, Freya still manages to stay above half health. Either way, that prompts me to go for the early terastallization so Freya can become a pure grass type, as I start setting up with Nasty Plot. And despite being confused, Luxio continues to land more bites, including getting another critical hit that leaves Freya with just 13 HP. I was hoping to get off one more Nasty Plot to bring Freya to +6, but +4 will do. We land a Matcha Gotcha that takes Luxio out while healing back a good chunk of HP. Bellybolt is next, and now I take the opportunity to set up that last Nasty Plot. A Spark does paralyze, but a Held Cherry Berry clears it up right away, allowing Freya to land another Matcha Gotcha unimpeded. This puts her in prime condition as Miss Magis comes out last and terastallizes. She confuses Freya with a Confuse Ray, but they manage to power through and fire off another Matcha Gotcha to take Miss Magis down in a single hit, winning us our third badge. With the new level cap, I can get myself a couple more encounters. Oh hey, when did you guys become a quadruple? Huh. Anyway, I make my return to Kitakami, and in the chilling waterhead I find a lonely, static encounter Carbink, who I catch and name Scold. Then back in East Province 3, I pick one of the many Voltorbs rolling around in the hills and name it Balder. Get it? Balder?
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
Anyway, with those two, we now have a full team and then some, and with Scold's addition in particular, we now have a useful rock type just in time to take on Mela of Team Star. My strategy for her fight is fairly simple. I start with using Sandstorm to get rid of her Torkoal Sun, then immediately terastallize into a pure rock type in order to power up Scold's Ancient Power. Scold does get burned on the next turn, but thanks to a Held Leftovers, they essentially recover what they lose, and the attack drop doesn't apply as we keep spamming Ancient Power, which I went ahead and boosted up to 8 power points thanks to a few PP ups I had on hand. And it's a good thing I did, as while Ancient Power does deal some decent damage, it would probably take more than a few extra for Scold to take down Mela's Starmobile on their own. Thankfully, all it can really do is repeatedly use ineffective Blazing Torques, which ends up doing very little damage. We continue to spam Ancient Power ourselves, and while we're not quite lucky enough to get the Omni Boost, by Scold's 7th Ancient Power, Mela's Starmobile goes down. Skull's battle debut goes down without any major hitches, earning us our second victory against Team Star. After my Valkyries easily take down the Titan Orthworm, as well as witnessing someone's grandpa escaping from the nursing home, I make my way to West Province 2 to catch myself a Rotom. It's a well-known little trickster, so it seems fitting to name it Loki, although a careful nature doesn't really help them out. What does help is Loki's versatility, thanks to the Rotom catalog we win at an auction. With that, we can switch its secondary typing between 5 different types at any time, so to prepare for our next gym battle, I go ahead and change Loki into their washing machine form. Thor then evolves into Magneton, and can immediately evolve into Magnezone thanks to a Thunderstone I picked up from, God knows where. Balder evolves into Electrode as well, and with 3 fully evolved electric types on the team, Kofu has pretty much no chance of posing any serious threat. Balder takes care of his Veluza with a couple Electro Balls, then a single Volt Switch takes care of Wugtrio, while bringing Thor in for free against Kofu's terastallized Crabominable. One Thunderbolt later, and someone passed the butter, we've got crab for dinner. On the way to the Tack Tree Thicket for our next fight, Heimdall finally evolves into Bronzong, and I also happen to come across a shiny Buizel. If I were playing a typical Nuzlocke run, the often used Shiny Claws would kick in to let me use it, but alas, this golden girl is a girl, so into the box she goes. Our next team star fight against Atticus starts off a little shaky. I wrongfully assume that his Skuntank will go for Sucker Punch as I try to set up with a Bulk Up, but since Valkyrie resists it, it instead immediately goes for a Venoshock. Even with the attack boost, a lunge doesn't do enough as the second Venoshock brings them down below half, so that ends up being a bit of a bust. I switch gears by switching to Thor to negate the next Venoshock, then have them paralyze Skuntank with a Thunder Wave. It starts using Sucker Punch as I originally wanted, so I go ahead and take the opportunity to set up an electric terrain on the next turn. Skuntank does fight through paralysis to finally land a Sucker Punch, but the damage is negligible as the powered up Thunderbolt finally takes it down. Atticus sends out his regular Reverum next, so I pull out Loki in his watch form to avoid a bulldoze. A couple assurances brings Loki down to about half, but a Hydro Pump and a Shockwave easily takes care of it. Next is Muck, whose Sludge Wave ends up getting blocked as Heimdall comes in, and since its only other move is Mud Slap, Heimdall ends up being the perfect counter thanks to Levitate. This allows Heimdall to safely let loose a couple extra sensories to take Muck down easily. That just leaves the Starmobile, which does threaten Heimdall with a Flame Charge, but they're bulky enough to tank the super effective damage while dealing decent damage with extra sensory. In fact, we both seem to deal an almost equal a percentage of damage back and forth, but since the Starmobile is faster, we are forced to switch out. I bring in Balder, but after a strong noxious torque, I just have it Volt switch out to Thor, who gets the pleasure of landing the finishing blow, taking down our third Team Star member. Next up right away is our favorite guy Larry and his normal types. I lead with Heimdall against Kamala, who starts with a yawn as I start setting up with Iron Defense. Not only does this boost their defense, but it also increases the power of Body Press. So after a weak Sucker Punch, a Body Press easily takes care of Kamala, after which Heimdall falls asleep. I don't bother having Heimdall hold Chesto or Lumberry to wake them up right away, since I don't expect his Dunsparce to do much damage outside of a critical hit. That's obviously a bit risky, but it ends up paying off for us. After a few turns of ineffective Hyper Drills, Heimdall eventually wakes up and uses another Iron Defense to increase their defense further. And with plus 4 defense, Larry's Dunsparce and Terastallized Staraptor have no hope of surviving 2 more boosted Body Presses. Just like that, Heimdall nets us another solo gym victory. Our next fight against Nemona is notable for coming right after the fight with Larry, with no chance to change up the team, and it's also the first fight where her starter is fully evolved and packing their signature move. Heimdall starts off by surviving a couple super effective bites from Lycanroc before taking it out with a Body Press. Freya gets paralyzed by Pomo before taking it out with a Machagacha and a Hex, then I switch to Scald who sets up a Light Screen, which helps in taking some Water Pulses from her Gumi, helped further by some help leftovers. Pretty simple so far, but from here, things get a little bit nuts. Scold's first Ancient Power ends up getting the 10% Omni Boost, which, as I soon find out, ends up being very essential. A Rock Slide takes out Gumi, and we're in a good spot as her fully evolved Skeledirge comes out last and Terastallizes. Scold ends up missing their next Rock Slide, while Skeledirge decides to go for Lick of all things. We initially avoid the paralysis, and manage to land the next Rock Slide, which just barely doesn't do half. But then a second Lick does manage to get the paralysis. So I decided to Terastallize as well, turning Scold into a pure rock type, hoping the extra damage boost will be enough. Skeledirge starts to go for Torch Song, which does very little damage, but the boost to its special attack does give it the chance to snowball. And then Scold's next Rock Slide just barely doesn't kill. Another Torch Song continues to power Skeledirge up, then Scold gets fully paralyzed. At this point, there's already a huge risk of things falling apart if I switch to someone else, so there's no going back. I keep Scold in, they survive a third Torch Song, and then they manage to fight the paralysis, landing a final Ancient Power, giving us the win. That was a close one. With Nemona's battle lust momentarily satiated, it's now time to make our way up Glaciato Mountain, where on the way up I can find a Cryogonal, who I named Forsetti. I have never used a Cryogonal before in any playthrough ever, so I'm pretty excited to see what it can do. And since our next fight is the double battle against Rime, I decided to play around with a new strategy. I have Loki change into their Fridge form to become part Ice type, and pair them up with our newest team member. After Rime's Bayonet connects with a weak Sucker Punch on Loki, I have Forsetti start up by setting up the Snow with Snowscape, only for it to fail. That means it's already snowing in the game, but it sure does not look like it. So that's a turn wasted, but it does mean that Loki can land an accurate Blizzard to at least break Mimikyu's disguise. But since both of Ryan's Pokemon survive their first turn, they end up getting the speed boost from the crowd. Not that it matters. Another Sucker Punch and Slash don't do much damage, and a Freeze Dry Blizzard combo takes Bayonet out and leaves Mimikyu in the red and frozen. My team gets a special attack boost for that feat, so after Forsetti sets up a light screen just to play it safe, Another blizzard takes down Mimikyu and brings Houndstone below half, who then goes for a dig. This leaves Toxtricity an open target, so after terrestrializes into a ghost type, another freeze drive and a super effective hex easily take it down, winning us our... Holy crap, I really should have seen that coming. Luckily, Forsetti just barely hangs on with 3 HP. I switch Forsetti out to be safe, but Loki goes ahead and ends the fight with one final hex. It was definitely a risk keeping a Pokemon with base 50 defense in for this long, but everything ended up working out just fine in the end. Next I head down to South Province 6, where I can find a Sinistee, who I named Frigg. Then in this particular spot in West Province 1, you can find a cracked teapot that can be used to immediately evolve Frigg into Poltergeist. Valkyrie once again proves to be a Titan killer by easily taking down the Titan Iron Threads, and after essentially repeating our previous performance against Nomona again, as well as surviving the most mind-numbing gym challenge in the history of the franchise, we can finally take on Tulip and her psychic types. Balder starts us off with a foul play that lands a critical hit, bringing Tulip's Farigiraf down to a 4th, making it easy to take down on the next turn. I then have Balder set up a light screen against Gardevoir, before Volt switching over to Thor. A couple of resisted psychics do next to nothing thanks to said light screen, as Thor easily takes Gardevoir out with a super effective flash cannon. Next up is a Spathra, who can hit us slightly harder with a Shadow Ball before getting paralyzed by a Thunder Wave. I then swap in Washing Machine Loki, who can then take a Spathra down with a powered up Hex. Last is Florges, as Tulip and I both go for Terastallization. In this case, Loki returns to their natural ghost typing, and having taught them Terrablast beforehand, they can let loose a stab, Terastallized ghost type Terrablast that does a little over a third. Cool. A little anti-dramatic, but at the same time it certainly helps that there's nothing Florges can do offensively. Loki just needs to survive a Petal Blizzard and Moonblast, and by the 3rd Terrablast, Florges is knocked out, granting us our 7th gym badge. The 8th and final gym battle is even easier. Air Fryer Loki overcooks Grush's Frostmoth with an Overheat, and while Heimdall misses an initial Hypnosis and gets hit hard from Beartic's critical hit Icicle Crash, they manage to flip it around by hitting hard back with a Body Press, dodging a second Icicle Crash, then successfully connecting with the Hypnosis to put it to sleep. This lets me bring in Thor safely to Terastallize into a pure Steel type, powering up its Flash Cannons enough to finish off Beartic and take down Titan in a single hit. His Terastallized Altaria barely manages to survive and retaliate with a couple Hurricanes, but Thor naturally resists them while avoiding getting confused before a final Flash Cannon seals the deal. That's all 8 badges acquired. Throughout the run, I've been steadily obtaining as many Gimme Ghoul coins whenever I could, and at this point my efforts bear fruit. I take a trip to Casseroya Lake, where I can finally catch Odin the Gimme Ghoul, and with 999 coins in tow, they can evolve into Golden Go right away. At first I thought that Odin was our final possible encounter, but after double checking, I realized I completely forgot about Ditto. I go ahead and head to West Province 2 and find one disguised as a Curlia and name it Tyr, but at this point I don't really have a place for Ditto on my team. There are very specific instances where a Ditto could be useful, but I don't feel like it justifies taking up one of my 6 team slots, so Tyr gets to chill in the box for the remainder of the game. Nope, the team I have now should be more than enough to cover our remaining battles, starting with Team Star's Ortega and his fairy types. I lead with Thor, who destroys Ortega's Azumarill with a super effective Thunderbolt, but a single Mud Slap from his Darkspun immediately causes a Flash Cannon to miss. Not wanting to play that game, I immediately switch over to Lawnmower Loki, who is able to avoid the next Mud Slap. A Discharge brings it just below half, and after a decently strong play rough on the following turn, Loki ends up missing a Leaf Storm. I risk keeping Loki in, as another play rough brings him down below half, then play it safe by going for another, more accurate Discharge. This, understandably, isn't enough to get that bread, so I'm forced to bring back Thor to try again. This time another Mud Slap doesn't cause us to miss, as Thor manages to land a Flash Cannon to take Darkspun down. Wigglytuff goes down much more easily with just a single Flash Cannon, and like that, we're finally left with Ortega's Starmobile. It sets up Fairy Terrain coming in, only to immediately use Steel Roller that inadvertently gets rid of it. Thor's Flash Cannon manages to hit for what looks like exactly half, and gets the special defense drop. It desperately goes for Confuse Ray, and while Thor initially hits themselves, they fight through Confusion on the following turn to land one last Flash Cannon, granting us another Team Star victory. Thor gives us a repeat performance by nearly single-handedly taking care of the Titan Dondozo and Tatsugiri, and with all the Titans out of the way, we're down to our last Team Star fight before we officially hit the endgame. I lead with Frigg and start boosting their special attack with Nasty Plots, which also helps avoid her Toxicroak Sucker Punches. Once Frigg is at +6 special attack, it's time to go all in. First, a Sucker Punch finally hits and activates their weak armor ability, lowering their defense while raising their speed 2 stages. And with the Wide Herb equipped, it's as if the defense drop never happened. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you know what that means. Frigg proceeds to outspeed and completely decimate Aeries' entire team, including her Starmobile, which ends up going down with a single Psychic. With that, Aerie now has to contend with the fact that she was just completely manhandled by a sentient teapot. We're officially in the endgame now, which means it's time to cap off the various story arcs, starting with the fight against our principal. Valkyrie starts off with a strong Megahorn that just barely doesn't get the KO against Clavel's Oranguru, which means it's able to get off a yawn before going down on the next turn, but a Held Chest of Berry clears the sleep up right away. Next up is Abomasnow, who sets up the snow, and while I could take it out with a single close combat, I go for another Brick Break in order to let it waste a turn setting up an Aurora Veil, which ends up getting shattered on the next turn. Houndoom comes out next and hits hard with a Fire Blast that ends up getting the burn. This means Valkyrie's next Brick Break doesn't get the kill, so we'll need to switch over to Easy Bake Oven Loki to resist another Fire Blast. Then Houndoom's Dark Pulse on the following turn ends up getting a crit before finally going down with a Discharge. It's a bit risky, but I keep Loki in against Gyarados, but they manage to outspeed and take it down with another quad-effective Discharge. Rattatas comes in safely against Poltergeist's Shadow Ball, but a Crunch isn't quite enough to take it out before they get burned by a Will-O-Wisp. Either way, another Crunch is enough to take it down, and that just leaves us with Meowscarada. I switch to Thor, and even with the resistance, Meowscarada's Terastallized Flower Trick still does a good chunk of damage. So to play it safe, I have Thor set up a Reflect, as Meowscarada switches to using Shadow Claw. Thor is still at decent health, so I keep them in for one more turn to get off a Flash Cannon that brings them below half, before switching to Odin. They take another Flower Trick coming in, and I'm reminded that critical hits ignore screens, not just defense boosts. Whoops. So the Reflect ended up being somewhat pointless, but it does help lower the damage of a super effective Shadow Claw, giving Odin the opportunity to make it rain and get us the win against Director Clavel. Next up, we get to take on the Elite Four Gauntlet, starting with Rika. All we have to do is start with Frigg setting up with a Shell Smash, having the defense drops restored with a held Wide Herb, then proceed to nearly completely sweep her entire team with ease. Her Donphan can survive a hit thanks to its sturdy, and connect with a strong Earthquake that lowers their defense thanks to weak armor, so to play it safe against her Terastallized Clodsire, I switch to our other Cup of Tea, who can easily resist a critical hit Earthquake, then take it out with a couple Terastallized boosted Machagachas. Easy peasy. Next up is Poppy, and I lead with Loki in his oven form, completely melting her Copperaja with an Overheat. Before switching Loki out to reset the special attack drop, we go ahead and burn Bronzong with a Will-O-Wisp to reduce its attack, giving us a safer switch into Odin. A single Shadow Ball easily knocks down Bronzong, then a Focus Blast thankfully connects to bring Poppy's Magnezone down to its sturdy, allowing it to set up a light screen. After another Shadow Ball takes it out on the next turn, I switch over to Baldur to take on Corviknight. But Baldur's Thunderbolt doesn't even bring it down to half thanks to the light screen, and after he uses Iron Defense, a boosted Body Press does enough damage to force us to pivot out with a Volt Switch. I send in Odin, who can avoid the next Body Press as their light screen finally wears off. A Shadow Ball takes Corviknight down, and we're finally left with Poppy's Terastallized Tinkaton. I decide to keep Odin in, and after Tinkaton becomes a pure Steel type and does about a third with a resisted Gigaton Hammer, another Focus Blast manages to connect, bringing her down to about a fourth. I go for a Recover as Tinkaton connects with a resisted Stone Edge, which allows us to safely use a Shadow Ball to take her down on the next turn, winning us our second Elite Four fight with ease. Larry's up next, and now it's Forsetti's time to shine. We start by setting up the snow, which is immediately replaced by the sun thanks to Tropius using Sunny Day. But this is actually okay, as I just have Forsetti use Snowscape a second time to flip the weather back over, which immediately prevents Tropius' Solar Beam from firing off instantly. And with the snow in place, I have Forsetti Terastallize and start blasting powered up Ice Beams. Tropius, Staraptor, Altaria, Oricorio, and even Larry's Terastallized Flamigo all fall like flies to the double Snowflake. The same nearly goes with our next fight against Hassel and his Dragon types. This time I forego setting up the snow, and immediately start things off by taking down his Noivern and Haxorus with a single Ice Beam each. His Dragalge has enough special defense to survive a single Ice Beam, and manages to poison Forsetti with a Sludge Bomb before going down. Flapple falls just by looking at our humongous Snowflake, and now we're already left with Hassel's Ace Baxcalibur. Forsetti won't be able to complete another sweep, having been poisoned and the fact that Baxcalibur hits like a truck. So I switch to Scold as Baxcalibur Terastallizes, and a Glaive Rush is completely neutralized thanks to Scold's Fairy typing. But that doesn't mean much in the end, as an Ice Skull Crash on the next turn manages to get a critical hit, bringing Scold down to a third. I did have them hold a snowball to increase their attack to hopefully get off a stronger rock slide, but instead Scold flinches as well. So we have to switch again, this time to Thor, who can better withstand another Icicle Crash. Thor is vulnerable to Baxcalibur's Brick Break, but they managed to survive in order to set up a Reflect, which will help give the team some wiggle room. I switch to Odin, who avoids another Brick Break, and with the Reflect up, easily tanks a Gleifrush. They can retaliate with a double-powered Dazzling Gleam, finally taking Baxcalibur down, and earning us our final Elite Four victory. This just leaves us Champion Geeta to complete our gauntlet. Rattata starts off by completely annihilating her Espathra with a 9-hit Population Bomb, helped by a held White Lens. Next is the physically defensive Avalugg, so I switch to Odin predicting it'll use Body Press, then a single super effective Make It Rain takes it down in a single hit. This baits in Geeta's King Gambit next, so I pivot to Valkyrie, who can easily tank a Kotao Cleave, deal some Rocky Helmet Chip, then retaliate with a deadly, quad-effective close combat. I then switch over to Loki to roast Geeta's Go-Go with an Overheat, then for Veluza I switch to Thor, who does get their defense lowered by a Liquidation, but can outspeed the following turn and take it out with a Thunderbolt. And just like that, we're left with our Ace Glamora, and Heimdall ends up being the perfect counter. First by dodging an Earth Power coming in thanks to Levitate, then being able to tank its powered up Rock Terra Blast with ease. Along with Leftovers recovery, Heimdall just needs to tank a few more Terra Blasts while continuously countering with Body Press, and eventually Glamora falls, and we've officially become champion of the Paldea region. In any other Pokemon game, that would be the end of the run, but this is Violet, and we still have a few more battles left to wrap up each story arc, starting with Penny and her team of Evolutions. Her Umbreon falls to a single close combat from Valkyrie, then I switch over to Loki to resist her Flareon's Flare Blitz. A Hydro Pump connects and nets us a one-hit KO on the next turn, then I bring in Forseti to not really resist a Leaf Blade, but they can outspeed the next turn to take Leafeon out with a Life Orb boosted Ice Beam. I have Forseti recover as Vaporeon comes in, and they do a much better job of resisting a Hydro Pump thanks to their absurd special defense. After another recover, I switch over to Loki as Vaporeon goes for a useless Baby Doll Eyes. A couple discharges later, and Vaporeon is next to go down. For Jolteon, I switch to Heimdall, who gets taken down to about a fourth after a couple Thunders, but a single Earthquake easily takes it out. That just leaves us with Penny's ace, Sylveon. I switch to Rattata, predicting the Shadow Ball, then have them Terastallize to power up their Population Bomb. Baby Doll Eyes does make sure that even a full 10 hits can't get the KO, but that only delays the inevitable. With a final Seed Bomb on the next turn, we secure our win and end Team Star for good. The fight against Arven starts similarly, with Valkyrie instantly taking out his Greedent with a Life Orb boosted close combat. I decide to keep them in against Scovillain, and it proves to be the good choice, as another close combat nets us another easy one-hit KO. But that ends up leaving Valkyrie with 2 defense and special defense drops, so when Toadscruel comes out next and knowing it'll easily outspeed, I switch to Odin, thinking it would go for a Spore or a Power Whip, but it ends up using Earth Power instead, which brings Odin close to half HP. Not quite what I was hoping for, but it does give us the opportunity to switch to Fan Loki to avoid the next Earth Power 2 times over, then retaliate with a couple Air Slashes, aided by a Choice Scarf to ensure they outspeed. Toadscruel goes down, which prompts Arven to send out his Garganacl next. I switch to Freya on a Stone Edge, then heal back with a Machigacha on the next turn. Garganacl only has time to set up some Stealth Rocks before going down, with Cloyster coming out next. This thing threatens with a Skill Link Icicle Spear, so I pivot over to Thor, who ends up taking next to no damage. A Thunderbolt easily takes it out on the next turn, leaving us with Arven's Ace Mabostiff. I keep Thor in to set up a Reflect as it Terastallizes, and a Fire Fang brings it below half. I then bring Valkyrie back in to resist a Crunch, Terastallize, survive a super effective Psychic Fangs, then finish it off with a single hit with a final close combat, giving us the win, and completing the Titan story arc. We're now down to our final battle against our rival Nemona with her toughest team yet. Once again, Valkyrie leads the charge, this time being the one to hold our Choice Scarf, allowing them to outspeed her Lycanroc and take it out with a single close combat. Palmont is next, and I switch to Frigg, who could avoid his close combat coming in, but a strong double shock on the next turn brings Frigg down to just 20 HP. That activates their weak armor, meaning it's forced to use its Held Wider before we can get off a Shell Smash. But a +4 boost to its speed is more than enough to safely outspeed and use Giga Drain, as my focus at this point is to get some health back, but even a +2 special attack isn't enough to get the kill. That leads to a strong Ice Punch that Frigg barely survives on 4 HP. Palmont goes down on the next turn with a Psychic, but at this point Frigg has become even more of a glass cannon. So when the Dunsparce comes out next, I decide to play it safe by swapping to Heimdall. I begin going for Iron Defense, and thanks to their held leftovers and Protect, Heimdall can stay healthy, but we're also running up against the Dunsparce using Coil. So for now, I decide to take it out with a couple body presses. Next up is Orthworm, and I Protect first to scout what it'll use and get some more leftovers recovery. It's going for Body Press, which means it's fairly safe to go for another Iron Defense and Protect combo. Heimdall is now at +4 defense, so we exchange body presses, but Heimdall's is more than strong enough at this point to take it out in a single hit. Goodra is next, and another Protect shows it's going for Muddy Water. The next one hits on the next turn, and it ends up lowering Heimdall's accuracy, causing their next body press to immediately miss. I continue to go for Protect to get the leftovers recovery, but then we both proceed to miss our next attacks. Another round of Protect gives us more recovery, but another Muddy Water lowers Heimdall's accuracy even further, and they miss another body press. I'm starting to get annoyed at this point, and my options for taking on Goodra are limited. I can switch to Forseti, who thankfully doesn't get their accuracy lowered from another Muddy Water coming in. Thankfully, despite Goodra being specially tanky, an Ice Beam manages to do over half. The problem I foresee is that since their Skelligurge is coming out next, I don't want to give it a free turn by switching Forseti out and giving it the chance to set up with its Torch Song. But instead of doing something smart, I do something dumb, by going for a weaker Flash Cannon first, then switching to Loki who's holding an Assault Vest. It helps reduce the damage of Goodra's special attacks, but then a Shadow Ball from Loki doesn't do much. At all. That means Goodra can get another attack in before finally going down. So Loki isn't in the best condition as Skelligurge comes out and terastallizes, but at the very least, Loki is in their washing machine form, so we go for a Hydro Pump, but it misses, at precisely the wrong time. Skelligurge's Shadow Ball doesn't do much damage, so even though we're risking a crit, I decide to keep Loki in to try again. But it misses again, and now my tactical blunder is leaving me panicking. I don't have many healthy options left, and the ones that aren't capable of taking a hit. So I make the decision to keep Loki in to try one more time. I click on Hydro Pump, and it connects, but Skelligurge barely hangs on, launches another Shadow Ball, and Loki goes down, giving us our first death of the run. I think playing around with Goodra instead of just taking it out with Forseti is what ultimately cost me my most versatile team member, which hurts even more considering how far we are in the run. But thanks to Loki's last-ditch effort, Valkyrie can come in safely to clean things up with a final close combat. With that, our greatest rival is finally defeated, and we are the undisputed champion of Paldea, at the cost of a crucial team member. But just because we're the champion of champions doesn't mean we're done. We still have to delve into the depths of Area Zero for the final battle against AI Turo. While making my way down there, I take the opportunity to allow myself to catch our actual final encounter. Cause you see, Area Zero is teaming with future Paradox Pokémon, which also happen to be genderless. So for novelty's sake, and for actual strategic reasons, I go ahead and catch myself an Iron Bundle, who I name Fimbulvetter. Its sassy nature is pretty terrible, lowering its amazing speed to increase its awful special defense, but that actually might work in our favor, which you'll soon see. So after bringing Fimbulvetter up to speed, it's finally time to finish this run by taking on AI Turo and his team of future Paradox Pokémon. This team of Polycules, Cups of Tea, and Metallic Lifeforms ended up forming a strange yet fairly cohesive team so far, so let's see if they have what it takes to end this run on a strong note. We start the fight with my own Paradox Pokémon against Turo's Iron Moth. Because of Fimbulvetter's sassy nature, their special attack ends up being higher than their speed, meaning its held booster energy increases their special attack instead. Thanks to that, a couple lucky Hydro Pumps can do more than enough damage to take down both Iron Moth and Iron Thorns without any issues. Iron Hands, on the other hand, is a different beast, and I admittedly start to get a bit sloppy with my decision making here. I decide to keep Fimbulvetter in, only for them to get flinched from a fake out, and although an Ice Beam on the next turn does some great damage, a single Drain Punch manages to take Fimbulvetter down just like that. Their time on my team was short, but Fimbulvetter still did us a great favor in giving us a strong start. I send out Frigg next, but my sloppiness continues. Instead of just going for the kill, I decide to try setting up our usual Shell Smash White Herb combo. But a Thunder Punch deals some nasty damage while activating Friggs' weak armor, before a Psychic on the next turn can finally take it out. Naturally, Iron Jugulus is sent out next, and there's nothing Frigg can do to seriously hurt it. That means the whole Shell Smash strategy was kinda pointless in the end. So I switch to Valkyrie to resist a Dark Pulse coming in, then land a Rock Slide that doesn't do as much as I was hoping. Iron Jugulus survives, then connects with an Air Slash to take Valkyrie out next. Of all the things to lose them onto, it had to be Iron Jugulus, of course. But we're obviously not done yet. Rattata comes in to take down Iron Jugulus with a super effective Play Rough. Then I pivot to Odin against Turo's own Iron Bundle, who just sets up the snow. And then it goes for Snowscape again? Wait, it did this in my last Violet playthrough too. I just programmed to always use Snowscape twice? That's weird. Either way, this gives Odin the opportunity to set up with a nasty plot, and after a weak Water Pulse on the next turn, Iron Bundle falls to a boosted Dazzling Gleam. That just leaves Turo's final Pokemon, Iron Valiant. But because of Turo's previous tactical blunder, Odin can easily resist a Spirit Break despite its booster energy increasing its attack, then fire back with a +2 boosted Make It Rain to get the one-hit KO. With that, AI Turo is defeated, and I have just completed a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Violet using only genderless Pokemon. I made a few mistakes in that last fight that left me with a couple more deaths than I wanted, but overall, I would say this was a pretty good run. To be fair, I played that fight after midnight, so I probably wasn't in the most lucid state, but a win is a win is a win. I was pleasantly surprised by how good this group of Pokemon were, and I ended up having a blast. Don't count out the non-binaries for your next playthrough. It's hard to pick an MVP for this run, since almost everyone had an important role to play, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Loki the Rotom. Although Loki didn't end up making it to the end, they still played a huge part. Some of its form-specific moves have some dubious accuracy, but its unique combination of great stats, levitate ability, and the versatility of its typing helped Loki fit in most of my team strategies. So if you enjoyed watching some non-gender descript monsters band together for survival, or just this run in general, please don't hesitate to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.